6 years of marriage. For Ethan, it had always felt like more than that, a lifetime of building, shaping, dreaming. At 35, he believed he had everything he'd ever wanted. The steady hum of a successful career, a beautiful home nestled in a calm suburban neighborhood, and Emily, his wife, his anchor, the woman he loved beyond words. Emily was 33, vibrant and warm, the kind of woman who seemed to brighten every room she entered. But in Ethan's mind, she was more than just a wife. She was his best friend, his confidant, the partner who shared in his hopes and fears. Together, they had woven a life, blending their dreams into a tapestry of shared memories and plans for the future. Yet, like any story woven over time, threads began to loosen. It started almost imperceptibly. Ethan noticed how Emily's attention began slipping away from their conversations, her gaze often drifting to the glow of her phone. There were evenings when, sitting beside him, she seemed worlds apart, her fingers scrolling, a small, secretive smile playing on her lips, one he didn't recognize. When he asked, she brushed it off. "It's just the girls," she'd say lightly, laughter masking whatever hesitance lingered underneath. But the smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. Their late-night talks, once moments of sacred intimacy, faded into silence. Now she sat in bed, the soft blue light of her screen illuminating her face, while Ethan stared at the ceiling, fighting the stubborn swirl of doubt that crept into his mind. "Work's been crazy," she'd say, a practiced tiredness in her voice when he gently prodded. The casual kisses and worn smiles felt like a fragile veil over something deeper, something unseen. Ethan's heart clenched, though he tried to convince himself it was just exhaustion. After all, what marriage was perfect? But even as he reminded himself of their strength, a persistent ache gnawed at the edges of his certainty. One balmy Saturday afternoon, the neighborhood buzzed with the bright laughter of children, and the sizzle of the barbecue mingled with warm sunlight filtering through the tall oaks in the backyard. Their friends gathered, the air filled with chatter and clinking glasses. David was there too. David, at 37, the life of every party. With his charismatic smile and effortless charm, he drew people in like a magnetic force. Ethan had always counted him as a close friend, someone dependable, but now the way David's eyes lingered on Emily unsettled him deeply. Ethan watched as David laughed a little too hard at Emily's jokes, his hand brushing hers while handing her a cold drink. The casual touch was charged with something unspoken, a quiet signal that only Ethan seemed to perceive. He swallowed the sting in his throat and told himself not to overthink it. But over the following days, the seeds of doubt took root. A colleague's offhand remark pierced through the haze. "Saw Emily downtown the other day with some guy. Probably just a friend," Tom shrugged. The words planted themselves in Ethan's mind, growing louder with each passing moment. Nights became restless. At 2 a.m. he'd wake to find Emily sitting up, laughter soft and secretive as she glanced at her phone. When their eyes met, she'd flip the screen off with a quick, almost guilty smile. "Just a funny meme," she'd whisper, but the warmth that had once radiated from her seemed cold, distant. Ethan tried again, date nights, quiet walks, stolen moments hoping to bridge the growing distance. But exhaustion and busyness became her constant response. "I'm too tired," she said, the warmth in her voice dimming day by day. Each rejection felt like a brick in a wall rising between them. During another gathering of friends, Ethan noticed Laura, David's wife. Quiet, thoughtful, she carried an air of gentle sadness, like someone weathering a long, hidden storm. As she watched David with a mix of suspicion and hurt, Ethan felt a flicker of something raw and unspoken between them. Whenever their eyes met, it was as if they both silently acknowledged the unraveling of their worlds. That night back in his dimly lit bedroom, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of everything pressing down. The house was silent except for the distant hum of the city and the faint tapping of his fingers on the bedside table. Emily's peaceful breathing was a reminder of what was slipping away. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly alone in his own home, a stranger wandering through a life that no longer felt certain. And beneath it all, a quiet fear began to take hold. Had everything he thought he had been built on a fragile lie? The cracks were there. Subtle, almost invisible, but growing. And Ethan could no longer pretend they didn't exist. The days following the barbecue stretched long and heavy, each one laden with the weight of unspoken questions and the persistent ache of suspicion gnawing at Ethan's mind. The image of David's lingering gaze on Emily clung to him like a shadow, refusing to dissipate despite his efforts to push it away. It was like a faint, persistent pulse beneath the skin of his reality, an itch that couldn't be scratched. He found himself watching Emily more closely now, trying to catch the subtle signs he'd missed before. The distracted glances, the occasional hesitation before answering his questions, the faint blush that would creep onto her cheeks when her phone buzzed unexpectedly. She was still there, but in a way that felt distant, more like a flickering light than a steady flame. One uneventful Thursday afternoon at work, as Ethan sipped his lukewarm coffee, Tom's casual comment replayed in his mind. "Saw Emily in town," Tom had said with a shrug, "with some guy, probably just a friend." The words weren't much, but to Ethan they were everything. A seed planted in barren soil suddenly sprouted, twisting and growing into a tangle of doubt. Who was this guy? How long had she been hiding this from him? And why? That evening, Ethan's attempts at conversation fell flat. Emily told him she'd had a late work call, the excuse sounding hollow even to himself. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. He reached for his phone and typed hesitantly, fingers trembling as he composed a message he never thought he'd send. "Hey, have you noticed how close David and Emily seem lately?" His thumb hovered a moment before hitting send. Seconds later, his screen lit up with a reply. "Funny you mentioned that. I've been thinking the same thing. Laura." The confirmation felt like a dull blow, solidifying his fears. Laura's message was a thread, fragile yet real, connecting two hearts caught in the same storm. Over the next weeks, their texts became a lifeline, shared frustrations, whispered suspicions, raw emotions laid bare through the comforting anonymity of words. The world around Ethan was shifting under his feet, but amidst the turmoil, the idea of not being alone brought a faint flicker of solace. It was a rainy Friday evening when Ethan and Laura finally decided to meet in person. The park they chose was quiet, the early autumn chill wrapped around them like a shared secret. The pond's surface lay still, reflecting the somber sky, a mirror to the turmoil in their hearts. They sat side by side on a weathered bench, neither speaking at first, wrapped in a fragile silence that spoke volumes. Laura's voice eventually broke through, soft and vulnerable. "It feels like a nightmare, Ethan. How did we get here?" He squeezed her hand gently, his own voice rough with emotion. "I don't know, but what I do know is that I'm not going to let them erase what we had. Whatever comes next, I want to face it honestly." Laura nodded, a flicker of determination shining through her tear-filled eyes. Her strength surprised him. Despite her pain, she was resilient, a survivor. Their conversations grew longer, the late-night texts turning into heartfelt exchanges. They began to understand each other's wounds, their shared experiences weaving a fragile tapestry of trust and companionship. One evening, Ethan found Laura waiting for him on her porch, arms wrapped tightly around herself against the biting cold. The fatigue in her eyes mirrored his own. Inside, the small house was warm, filled with the soft glow of lamp light and the faint scent of lavender. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly, stepping aside to let him in. He smiled, though the weight of their shared sorrow lingered. "Of course, we need this." They talked for hours, sharing stories of love lost, deception, and the numb ache of betrayal. The walls that held their pain began to crumble as they found comfort in each other's presence. No masks, no pretense, just two broken souls seeking understanding. Late that night, as the rain tapped steadily against the windows, their conversation dwindled into a peaceful silence. Ethan glanced at Laura, noticing the way her eyes glistened with unshed tears and something deeper: hope. The connection they formed was more than just a refuge from their shattered marriages. It was a tentative flicker of something impossible to name but impossible to ignore. As days turned into weeks, Ethan's world was no longer defined by suspicion alone. The lines blurred between pain and solace, betrayal and connection. Every stolen moment with Laura was a balm to his wounded heart, even as the shadows of Emily and David's deception lurked ever close. Yet Ethan knew the truth was waiting to be faced. The fragile peace he'd found was temporary, a calm before a storm he could no longer deny. And as the leaves began to turn, so too did the chapter of his life, on the verge of collapse and yet pregnant with the possibility of something new. The cracks beneath the surface had deepened, but Ethan was no longer standing alone in the dark. The night was heavy with rain, each drop tapping a relentless rhythm against the windows of Ethan's apartment. Inside, the dim glow of the streetlights filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the worn furniture. Ethan sat hunched over his phone, fingers trembling as he typed yet another message to Laura. "David has another late meeting tonight. Emily's working late too." The terse words felt like a challenge, a call to action amid the storm consuming his world. Laura's reply was quick and resolute. "Do you want to find out once and for all?" Without hesitation, Ethan's heart pounded as he wrote back, "Yes." They agreed to meet in the shadowed recesses of a dark parking lot near Emily's office, where the streetlights blinked sporadically and a chill air hung thick with expectation. Both arrived in their cars, engines silent but their thoughts racing as they settled into the tense quiet, the night swallowing their fears and hopes alike. Minutes ticked by like hours. Then, from the glass doors of the office building, Emily appeared, glancing nervously around as if expecting to be caught. Her breath steamed softly in the cold air, but it was the small hand that slipped into a waiting one that rooted Ethan's stomach in dread. "David." Ethan's eyes met Laura's, their shared shock echoing in the silent night. The betrayal, once a distant suspicion, had now manifested in stark, unmistakable reality. They followed at a careful distance, hearts pounding beneath the cloak of darkness. The two pulled into a hotel parking lot, the dull yellow glow of the lamps casting elongated shadows as they stepped inside, their soft laughter carried faintly back to Ethan and Laura. The casual brushing of their hands was the cruel punctuation of the lie that had unraveled the fabric of Ethan's life. Laura gasped, a silent sob caught in her throat, and Ethan's hand shook as he raised his phone to capture evidence with the cold precision of a man shattered but determined. Each photo was a stab in his chest, a frozen moment of deceit. Back in the safety of Ethan's apartment, the two sat in numbing silence, the weight of what they had witnessed settling around them like a shroud. Finally, Laura's voice broke through the stillness, trembling yet fierce. "I can't believe this is happening." "Neither can I," Ethan whispered, his fingers absently tracing the edge of the worn armrest. His mind replayed every moment, every secret smile, every unseen message. The next morning came with a brittle sunlight and a heavy cloud hanging over their shared reality. Over coffee, Ethan tried to steady his voice, forcing calm that he did not feel. "How was work last night?" he asked, eyes searching Emily's face for cracks. She avoided his gaze, her response clipped and tired. "Busy." The lie was thin, fragile, and utterly transparent. Later, Ethan texted Laura with a bitter urgency. "We need to talk." Their meeting was arranged for a quiet park away from prying eyes, the world beyond fading into insignificance as they confronted their shattered lives. Sitting side by side on a weathered bench overlooking a still pond, words flowed freely, raw, unfiltered, and heavy with shared pain. "It feels like every piece of my life is cracking," Laura said softly, her voice layered with exhaustion and anger. Ethan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I wanted to believe there was still something salvageable, but the truth is a weight too heavy to carry alone." Their connection deepened with each confession and comforting word. The simple act of being understood rekindling a flicker of strength neither thought possible. Text messages multiplied into late-night conversations, and soon Laura's invitations to meet became more frequent. On one cold, rainy Tuesday, Ethan found himself standing on Laura's porch, the chill biting through his coat. She opened the door with a tired, genuine smile. "Thanks for coming," she said, stepping aside. Inside, the small living room was warm, the soft lamplight dancing on the walls. They settled on the couch with glasses of red wine, the rich aroma mingling with the quiet intimacy between them. Their conversations traversed the landscape of heartbreak, the betrayal, the lost trust, the nights spent wondering what had gone wrong. No need for pretense or guarded words. Here, they could lay down their shields and be nothing but raw and real. As the hours slipped by, something shifted. The anger and sorrow melted into a need for comfort and connection. When Ethan reached out tentatively, Laura met him halfway, their kiss hesitant yet charged, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared pain and fragile hope. The night was a fragile crossing point, a moment suspended between destruction and renewal. When they parted at dawn, uncertainty lingered, wrapped in the quiet understanding that whatever this was, it was born from the ruins of their fractured lives. In the days that followed, the pretense of normalcy became impossible. The clandestine bond between Ethan and Laura was a balm for their wounded souls, even as their shattered marriages continued to unravel in the background. Emily and David remained ensnared in their charade, the stolen glances and secret smiles fueling Ethan's burning resolve. His world was unraveling, yet amidst the chaos, a new thread was woven, fragile but resilient. As the autumn leaves turned and the chill crept deeper into the air, Ethan recognized a painful truth. Some foundations, no matter how carefully built, are destined to crumble. But amid the ruins, sometimes something new could be born. The moments of betrayal and heartbreak were etched into his skin, but so too were the beginnings of a connection, raw, unpolished, and dangerously real. And with that, Ethan faced the unknown not as a lone man, but as someone who had found an unexpected ally in the darkness. The night air was thick with tension as Ethan stood by the window, watching the dull streetlights flicker through the gentle rain. Every drop seemed to drum a harsh rhythm against the glass, echoing the storm that churned within him. His phone buzzed, Laura's message, "I'm on my way." His hand trembled slightly as he set the cup of untouched coffee down. Tonight, the fragile veil of their secrets was about to shatter. Moments later, the doorbell rang sharp and insistent, slicing through the silence like a blade. Ethan opened the door to find Laura standing there, rain-dampened and resolute, a quiet strength radiating from her despite the exhaustion lining her face. Together they waited, breath held, as the front door swung open again. This time Emily appeared, her smile only faintly faltering as her eyes landed on Laura. "What's going on?" Emily's voice trembled, tight with panic. Ethan swallowed the knot in his throat, stepping forward with a calm he barely felt. "It's time for the truth, Emily." His words hung heavy, a warning and a declaration. Before he could say more, the sharp trill of the doorbell interrupted him again. Ethan opened it to reveal David, his usual confident grin faltering as he took in the charged atmosphere. Laura stood unwavering, her eyes blazing with a fury Ethan had never seen before. "Ethan," David greeted nervously, shifting his weight as if bracing for impact. "What's this about?" "Come in," Ethan said, voice low, edged with steel. "It's time we all faced each other." David hesitated, but the weight of the moment left him no choice. He stepped inside, his shoulders slumping as if the very air pressed down on him, stripping away bravado. From the kitchen, Emily appeared again, her face pale, eyes flickering from Ethan to David. The four stood in the living room, a tableau of betrayal and shattered trust, the air suffocating with unspoken words. Ethan felt the years of love and hope crumble beneath him, replaced by raw, aching disbelief. "You two have been lying to us," Ethan began, voice cold, voice trembling with restrained fury. "We're done pretending we don't know." Emily's face paled further, the blood draining away as she stammered, voice faltering. "What are you talking about? This is ridiculous." Laura stepped forward, trembling but fierce. "Don't play dumb, Emily. We know about the hotel, the texts, the late-night meetings. We know everything." David's mouth opened, then closed, words caught in his throat. The confident facade shattered into a mask of panic and guilt. It just happened, David said, voice hollow. Ethan's glare was unyielding. Save it. You're not sorry, you're only sorry you got caught. Laura turned her eyes on David, her voice breaking but sharp. How could you do this to me, to us? David looked away, shame etched deep in his features. His silence spoke volumes. The confrontation fractured the room. Emily's facade crumbled with a bitter laugh, her voice rising in forced mirth. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. This is nothing. But the truth was undeniable. The photographs Ethan had taken earlier told the story more eloquently than words ever could. Emily's eyes widened as the evidence was laid bare, the carefully woven lies unraveling before her. With a sobering finality, Emily stormed past them, heels clicking sharply against the floor like the stinging punctuation in a broken sentence. David followed, his head bowed, shoulders slumped, a man stripped bare of dignity. The house seemed to sigh in the aftermath, weighed down by the devastation left behind. Ethan sank onto the couch, his body heavy with exhaustion and the ache of loss. Laura collapsed beside him, their silence a shared sanctuary. The moment stretched endlessly, filled with the echoes of shattered dreams. Neither spoke, their pain filling the room like a tangible presence. Finally, Laura broke the stillness, her voice barely above a whisper. What now? Ethan ran his hand through his hair, eyes fixed on the floor as if searching for answers among the cracks. Now we pick up the pieces. The night wore thin, but neither was ready to face the solitude that awaited beyond the walls of the house. They poured 2 glasses of wine, the sharp tang grounding them in the rawness of the moment. At first, their conversation floated lightly, awkward attempts to distract from the reality washing over them. Words danced around every topic but the one that tethered their broken hearts. But time has a way of peeling back layers, and the pauses lengthened, glances deepened, until Laura's voice pierced the fog. You know, she began softly, searching his eyes, I don't think I've ever felt this connected to someone before. The words caught Ethan off guard, but he could not deny the truth in them. The pull between them, born of shared pain and vulnerability, was undeniable. Me neither, he admitted quietly. Slowly, instinctively, they closed the space between them. The kiss was hesitant at first, a fragile test of boundaries. But as the frustration, the sorrow, and the anger melted away, it deepened into something raw, tender, and real. When they finally pulled apart, Laura's cheeks blushed a soft pink, her voice unsteady. I don't know if this is right. Neither do I, Ethan whispered, heart pounding fiercely. But it feels real. That night marked a fragile turning point. They had crossed a boundary forged from heartbreak and trust lost, into a space neither had anticipated. Dawn crept through the windows, cold and quiet. They parted with heavy hearts, uncertain of what lay ahead but both knowing nothing would ever be the same. Their world had fractured, but amid the ruins a spark flickered, tentative, fragile, and aching to be nurtured. And in that spark, Ethan found a glimpse of something he thought lost forever, the possibility of healing and hope. The sun hung low and muted behind gray clouds as Ethan moved the last box into the sparse confines of his new apartment. It was smaller, simpler than the house he'd once shared with Emily, the place where laughter had echoed and dreams had been laid like bricks to build their future. Now, it was just a hollow space marked by quiet echoes of a life unraveled. The weight of years lay heavy on him, each step in this new chapter filled with a mix of relief and grief. The divorce had been a war, fought not with weapons but with words, legal paperwork, and the cold calculus of broken trust. Emily had clawed for everything: the house, the car, savings they had painstakingly built together. Winning this fight didn't feel like victory, it felt like survival. Yet in this bare apartment, amidst the empty walls, Ethan found a strange kind of peace. It was messy, lonely, and harder than he had imagined, but it was his. A space to breathe, to heal, to rediscover who he was beyond the shadows of betrayal. Laura's life, too, had fractured in parallel. David had moved out not long after the confrontation, leaving her to rebuild on her own terms. She was stronger than he'd ever realized, resilient and determined, but the pain she carried was a silent companion beneath her calm exterior. Despite the emotional distance growing between them, Ethan and Laura stayed connected through sporadic texts and tentative calls. What had started as a refuge born of shared despair had gently faded into a quiet understanding that they each needed space and time for their own healing. Rumors filtered through mutual friends. Emily and David didn't last either. Whatever spark had ignited between them fizzled quickly, smothered by guilt, shame, and the consequences of their choices. Life after betrayal is rarely clean or neat. It's a jagged path through ruins, littered with scars that sometimes throb unexpectedly. Some days, the scars felt unbearably heavy. Dark mornings before the sun rose, moments where the past clawed back through memories sharper than any blade. Yet, the one certainty Ethan held close was this: it was his life now. A life apart from the illusions and deceit, filled with the possibility of something new, something genuine. He found solace in simple routines: the quiet hum of the city waking outside his window, the rich aroma of morning coffee, the pages of books that transported him beyond his troubles. Healing, he realized, was less about forgetting and more about learning to carry the weight with grace. There were moments when his phone buzzed with a message from Laura, a photo of a sunrise, a shared joke, a quiet concern. Those moments reminded him that human connection could still hold warmth, even in the aftermath of pain. Ethan's heart was a mosaic of broken pieces, but each shard held the promise of something whole someday. The future remained uncertain, fragile, yet alive with possibility. As night fell and city lights flickered like distant stars, he closed his eyes and whispered a farewell to the past. For 6 years he'd believed he had everything: love, stability, a home filled with promise. Now, standing at the edge of that life, Ethan knew something without a doubt. It was enough, enough to begin again. It was enough, enough to begin again.